Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time to listen in. I have a wonderful story for you today and a wonderful man who is going to enlighten you a lot on his spiritual journey. His name is Neil Elliott, and Neil was highly educated, owned a profitable consulting firm, and had a successful career and an amazing wife and family, but things were not all they seemed to be. Neil was facing a lot of challenges. In a phrase, he was in a dark place. And I think we've all been in dark places, but this was a dark place. Quite by accident, he discovered a higher road. As he traveled that road, he found the key to transforming his life. Over the course of the following year, Neil lifted himself to an inner state of love, peace, joy, and abundance. And this is what we're going to talk about. His perspectives on life changed entirely. His troubles and his tribulations were his impetus to find the key that enabled him to revolutionize his life. He learned that the search for a better life does not entail positive thinking, saying affirmations, chanting mantras, or traveling to India to sit in front of a guru, or any other popularized method of finding yourself. The key to ascend to both spiritual perception and truth, you need to use the right process to break through your entrenched human ego barriers. And we're always talking about the ego and how we can transcend it. And so I'm so excited to learn more about this journey of yours. Now, I've read the book, just got through it the first time. And we were just talking about how it's D. Neil Elliott, if you're searching for him. But we are going to dive right in and just find out a little bit. Maybe you can give the listeners just a little bit of background on kind of how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. And thank you, Angela, for that introduction and all of your kind words. So background, youngest of six, born in 1960, give everybody a benchmark. Youngest of six children, and my father died in 1965, just after I turned 5 years old, month after I turned 5, 2 months after. And so my mom had to go out and work. She got a job being a teacher. So we were pretty much left on our own. And back in the 60s, we walked to and from school by ourselves. There wasn't any driving, shuttling around. And bottom line is that, I grew up, I lived in northern British Columbia for a while because my mother remarried. Then I moved back down to south of Vancouver where I grew up and finished high school and bummed around. And then I decided I'd go to university. So I got an engineering degree. And in my 30s, I took a master's of business administration, and I worked in the corporate world managing large projects. I went from gainful employment in the 90s, late 80s and 90s to be a consultant in 2002. Started my own consulting firm and was very successful. But when you're a consultant, though, you don't get paid for time off. You don't get paid for stats. You don't get paid for vacation or sick time. So for me, and I think this happens to everybody that ends up on this path, or most people anyway, you work, work, work. And you always try and do your best so that you get repeat work. You don't want to, give substandard work to a client. And so what happened from 2002 to 2015 is that I was working a lot. We'd vacation. My second wife was from Germany, and we'd go visit Germany and Europe. Loved doing that. And when I was traveling and we were together, over in Europe or wherever, it was beautiful and it was fun and everything. But in reality, what was happening was I was slowly driving myself into this really deep, dark, despondent depression. And I didn't let anybody know. My family didn't know. My kids didn't know. Clients certainly didn't know. Friends didn't know. And in 2015, I realized I was there. And so I had started reading spiritual books in the 90s and meditated in the early 2000s, gave it all a go. And they were all good. And I loved the Wayne Dyer books. He's a great writer and he's funny. And he described things well. And they seemed logical and rational and all that kind of stuff. But I could never really grasp it and never really embodied it. So it didn't really work for me. But in 2015, I realized I was there. So I picked up some new books and I gave it another go to try and get myself out of this, what I called a funk. And it didn't work. And in 2017, our house had been on the market for about 5 years. We moved to this place, built a beautiful waterfront home, really expensive. And the market dropped in 2008 and it never recovered there. Vancouver just kept going up and up and up and up, but it never recovered there from the drop. So we had the house listed for about 5 years. We lost a whole bunch of money on it when we finally sold it. We sold it in November 2017. We had a signed deal, closed in, end of January, beginning of February. And our possession took place then. So my wife got on a plane. We're in this little one-bedroom rental apartments. My wife got on a plane to visit family and friends in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I sat down at this little one-bedroom kitchen table, crafted out my suicide note, planned my suicide. And I figured I'd do it after we moved to, get rid of all the crap I had and ease the burden on my wife. And then if I did it in a way which looked like and could be deemed an accident, then life insurance would pay out and my wife would be fine financially. And about a week prior to that, some information just fortuitously showed up and it promised to liberate me from my thinking if I studied it and I followed it. So I was looking for any really one last thing, sliver of hope. So I thought, okay, I'll give this a go. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I can always pull the trigger. And so I began this journey in mid to late November 2017. And it was so logical and so rational, and it worked for the mindset I have, based in engineering. It was logical, it was rational. I could bridge this gap between spirituality and science with the physics used in this. And it's all everybody will understand it if they decide to read it. But it was so logical and rational. So I just kept going. And I thought, and what was happening was that I was keeping anything that didn't make sense to me or seemed a little quasi unbelievable, so to speak. I just pushed it aside and I focused on the things that made sense and they were rational. And so I kept cycling through the material. And what was happening, I didn't know this. I'm just going to describe it this way now, is I was building a faith in myself and a faith in the universe. And a faith in what I was reading was a really good description of our truth. And I'm going to put that in air quotes. And so over the course of a year, so in about 7 months after I started on this process, I felt this little tingling at the top of my head. And I didn't know what it was. And it was about the size of a dime. And it felt kind of weird. I had an inkling of what it might be, but I didn't know. And so I just kept going with this process. And over time, over the next couple of months, that grew from about a dime to be 3-4 inches in diameter, 5 inches in diameter. And this energy would flow into my head and then down one side of my body and up the other side, or it would reside in my head or maybe my chest or my solar plexus. And it varied what it did. This is when I was meditating. It varied what it did, but it was consistent and it was just getting stronger and stronger. And that opening just continued to grow. So today you could put a bowl over my head, below my ears, and that's how big that opening is. Mm-hmm. And then in late December 2018, so that's 13 months after I started this process, I went into a meditation 2 days, so 2 times and 2 days apart. So I went into this meditation and I got myself settled, and then all of a sudden, this energy just totally filled me and enveloped me like a deep sea diver in an ocean of unconditional love. I felt totally loved, non-judged, didn't matter what anybody had done to me in the past. Didn't matter what I had done. I didn't care about what aches and pains my body had, what illnesses it had. I just felt totally cradled and loved for who I was. And I just wanted to stay there forever. I came out of that meditation. 2 days later, I had the exact same meditation. That just solidified for me that then this new knowledge I gained and this process I follow brings us back to our truth. And then from then, it's just been this onward, upward journey. And it's just been so incredibly magnificent. And I wish everybody would do it right now. You know, we'd have such a different world if everybody just went on this path. I know that's not going to happen. I know it doesn't work that way, and everybody's exactly where they need to be. And everybody eventually in this lifetime or some future lifetime will experience these things, and then they'll be on this path to become this embodiment of unconditional love and to spread that to everyone and everything that you come in contact with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting, like you say, how different our paths are. And what I love about interviewing people like you is this is another way to get there. And it's a very practical way to get there, is what I'm finding. I want to go back though, because I think, when we're in that dark place and you found yourself there and even writing your suicide note, and yet nobody around you knew, you know, we put on this front or this facade and we live our life and we have this turmoil that's going on inside of us and we don't feel like we can really talk about it. And so I wanted to bring that up because I think there are listeners out there, and I know even myself, I've gone through periods where maybe I haven't written the suicide note yet, but there's times where I think it'd be a lot easier if I just wasn't on this earth. And you get to that space in it, and I find it fascinating how, this came to you and you thought, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, well, I can always choose plan B, right? And how fascinating it is that you found this. And I think it just gives a lot of hope, that if we reach out, there is a way back to happiness and joy, and that there is hope.
Well, and there's a lot there that you said.
Mm-hmm.
So first is, our lives are not meant to be full of angst and anger and strife and struggle. Our lives are meant to be full of love and peace and joy. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that, when you're born, you are born into the environment. And I know some people will maybe think this sounds a little weird, but you've chosen this environment to be born into. You've chosen these parents and these people to interact with. You're born into this environment. You will be coming in with things from what we consider to be past lives. And we can talk about that, but we don't need to. But you consider to be past lives that you're going to want to experience and try and clear in this lifetime. And so this baby's born, this baby is an embodiment, especially if you're born into a family that can feed and clothe you. Baby is typically an embodiment of love and laughter and peace and joy. And the brain, as it develops, so the brain takes 5 years to get to a point where it can make decisions for itself. But in that period, that baby is exposed to this environment. And really, it's just like this little sponge absorbing all of the emotions and kind of language. So is the language loving and kind and supportive, or judgmental and hateful and vengeful, those kinds of things? All of that environment that you've grown up into and what you experience from your parents and your siblings and everybody you come in interact with, you're absorbing like a sponge, and it's starting to shape your outlook in life. And then at age 5, you go out into the world, typically grade, when you're 6, you start school, at least in Canada. And so then you're going out and you can start to make your own decisions on things, but really you're learning and you're interacting with other people and doing more of this. And by the time you get to be, a late teenager, early adult, you think you've become versed in the ways in the world. But really what you've done is you have programmed your subconscious and unconscious mind to interact in a way that is driven by your ego. Now, your ego is merely a tool. It's not to be condemned or judged. It's merely a tool to give you this experience while you're here. And it is designed to keep you safe and make sure you have food and water and those kinds of things. But we let the ego take control. And so all of this programming we have in these experiences, we adopt these things we think are right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. And then what we do is if you look back at your life, you will realize that you've adopted these things that you think is right, wrong, good, bad, true, and false. And this repeated behavior in terms of how you interact. And you're letting your external environment, you're responding to these externalities around you via this behavior and just reinforcing it and continuing to get these experiences back to you because these are the things that you're creating and you're attracting to you. And this process is to really, get to this point where you understand and know. And that's the difference. Not like spirituality is not an intellectual exercise. We need something that makes sense to us conceptually to be able to understand it, digest it, and go on the path. But spirituality is really an experiential thing. And it's not a one and done. You can't read a book and I'm good now. It's not I'm gonna meditate for a month and I don't feel any changes. Okay, well that doesn't work. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes discipline. But I can tell you the rewards are so incredibly magical for lack of any other term. And you will come to know that you are loved and you are supported and that your life is meant to be this place of, you in a place of total abundance, peace, love, joy, and that you will learn that, you're clearing these things and bringing balance back to these things to bring balance back to your whole being so that you can draw upon source energy, if you will, or God or Yahweh, the Tao, the universal, whatever you want to call it. And it will manifest things for you that you need whenever you need it. Not necessarily that you want, but that you need to be peaceful and loving and kind and joyful and looked after. And, I've really kind of condensed everything, but this is the thing that is available to you if you choose to take a path. And there's many, like you said, there's many paths to the top of the mountain. You just need to find one that makes sense and then stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes so much sense. And yet it's so hard to grasp when you're in that space of, well, like you say, all the beliefs that we've been growing up with. And I mean, you had, a beautiful house, all of the things, right, that we think that are going to bring us happiness and joy and going to fulfill us, because that's what we're told. If you work hard and you get a good job and you have lots of money and you get a family and then, but lots of people get there and then they realize that's not it. Why am I not happy?
Well, and you're absolutely right. And so the question, maybe you could ponder this or the audience could ponder this, but where did those expectations come from? These are things that you learned and adopted as a child. You're looking outside yourself going and everybody's talking to you about, you have to get a good job. You have to work hard. You have to, get a house. You need to get married. You need to have kids. And getting married and having kids, those are all good things. But all these concepts that we adopt and believe are true are not necessarily truth. Can you imagine a world where everybody is born, everybody in the world is well fed, well clothed, has shelter, has clean water, has food? And their sole purpose here is to bring joy for themselves, but everybody they interact, their sole purpose here is to do what brings them the greatest amount of creativity and joy. And that might be being a musician. It could be being a carpenter. It could be an artist. It could be a painter. But whatever, can you imagine getting up in the morning and whatever work you do is the thing that you love the most? That's the way life is meant to be. Not worrying about, do I need to get money? How do I pay my bills? Oh, I need to pay the mortgage and I need to buy all these other things that keep the wealthy wealthy, but keeps me in this current state we're in of, struggling and trying to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and therein lies more beliefs.
Yes, exactly.
We can't get ahead because, the government or, whatever it is. And so it's bringing those things to light and realizing that they're just beliefs and then transcending that.
Well, and that's where you need the process. So for me, I had to, the first thing I had to understand was that everything that I believe to be right, wrong, good, bad, true, false is really just a belief. And I share how I got through that in my book. But essentially I read a book by an author, probably not well known, but it made sense to me. And it got me to this point where I could understand that those were things that I chose to believe versus absolute truth. Now the question is, okay, that's great. But why do I want to change it? Well, then the next thing I read was a book on epigenetics that describes scientifically in a way for me that I could understand that what you think about either brings illnesses or health to your body, affects your cells at a biological level. Oh, okay. Well, then, so if I'm thinking this and I believe this, but really what it's doing is attracting illnesses and sickness to me or making me miserable and depressed, why maybe I need to look at those beliefs. And now the question is, well, then how do I change my beliefs? Because they're so ingrained. And that's what this process is about. It's about cleansing your consciousness and then rebuilding it to be congruent with where we come from before we're born and where we return to after we're dead. And where do we come from? We come from a state of unconditional love and peace and joy. And you are incarnated here to get to the point in this lifetime or a future lifetime where you are the purified and open channel of that unconditional love and peace and joy and abundance that you bring not only to yourself, but everybody you interact with. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it's not a one and done.
No. And I think that's something to clarify, because I think for a while, and I think a lot of people believed, if I could just find the magic thing, the magic book that will give me the answers, or the magic whatever, and then my life will change and everything will be good. And I'm finding the more I expand and the more, I learn about spirituality, that's not exactly how it goes. And certainly through my grief, coming through that process, I realized there was a lot of waves of healing that took place, things that got dug up from childhood that I was like, whoa, what's that? And it continues. It's not like, even though I've come this far, it's done. It's like, now I realize that, here's another opportunity for me to heal and expand and understand who I am even more than I did before.
Yes.
Even though it's really uncomfortable.
it can be very uncomfortable. And just because you're on this journey and you've woken up and you understand how and why we're here, and you have a different perspective of life, doesn't mean that everything around you is going to change. You view it differently, but things will still come to you that are coming to you for you to understand that they are your creation. So if something comes to you you don't like, it's not because it's that other person doing something. It's because you have attracted that to come to you for you to experience and for you to learn how to love that and accept that and process that emotion without rejecting it or denying it and let it pass through you. If there's something that comes to you that, you're really angry about or really upset about, it's merely, let me describe this and then I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So when you experience something, so during this pandemic, a few years ago, street was empty. Two women were out for a walk. And down the street from us is this historic building. And you go up these really large steps to the second floor. That's how you enter into it. So as these two women were approaching the base of that steps, an elderly woman came out of the top and she was really angry. And she was gesticulating wildly. And she stared down at them and said, "Look, you can stare all you want. I don't care," in a really angry way. And one of the women at the base of the steps said, "Oh my God, this woman's dangerous." She thinks, "Oh my God, this woman's dangerous. I'm phoning the police." She pulls out her cell phone, dials 911. The other woman thought to herself, "Oh, I wonder if this woman's okay. I wonder if she needs help." So she reached out to her. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" As soon as the woman at the top of the stairs heard that, she calmed right down. She explained her story and all of, the things that went along with it. And it was logical from her perspective. The only difference between the perspective of those two women at the bottom of the stairs is what beliefs they have. That's the only difference. You change your beliefs, you change your perspective of the world, you change your world. So when you get into this and you're further along, and people that have been on this journey will come to understand that everything that occurs around you, in and around you, is merely a reflection of your belief. And so things that come to you that trigger you and make you angry or make you upset, or you have a judgment associated with it, typically some kind of condemnation or something. Those are things for you to understand that that's all something that's happened in the past, that what we consider to be the past, or from what we consider to be a past life, and have been brought forward for you to bring balance and love to. If you are angry with something and you don't judge it, you will learn to become a neutral observer of everything. And so nothing will trigger you. Will still get triggered when something happens, but you'll observe it in this neutral fashion and go, "Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, I wonder why I'm feeling like that." And you let the feeling, you can only hold that feeling for about 45 seconds. If you hold it longer, you're caught up in your story about it. Mm-hmm. But if you just be this neutral observer, you feel the energy, you'll feel the feeling, and it'll pass in about 45 seconds. And then you can choose to respond in a loving, kind way. And when you do that, you start to get into this cycle of being this embodiment of unconditional love to everyone and everything in your environment. And when you do that, then these synchronicities start showing up in your life. And the more you bring balance back between this masculine thinking and this feminine feeling, when you can bring balance back, like we have let in this society, in this, industrial, financial, military construct that we have created and taken belief in, we have created through a lot of strong masculine energy, and the masculine, so we're really two things. We have this masculine energy, which is a thinking, conscious, creative plan. So you think, that's a consciousness plan. your feelings. So you think with electrical impulses in the brain, you feel with magnetic impulses in your nervous system. Your feelings attract and bond these particles of energy together to create this experience or like event that comes to you. And so when you learn to be the neutral observer, not to judge, let the energy pass through you, and then speak from the heart with love to come back to that, and not just in a lip service way, but know it and believe it and be it, then these synchronicities of peace, love, joy, and abundance just start showing up in your life fortuitously, unknowingly, surprisingly. In So yes, anyway, I could go on and on.
Yes, and I understand what you're saying, because I have experienced this myself on occasion, and not to say that I've mastered this process by any means, but I'm curious about the grieving process and what I've just been going through in the last 2.5 years. So you get into these, you grieve a lot of stuff. It's not just the loss of your partner. You're grieving the future that you thought you had, or you're grieving the past that has completely changed. Your relationships completely changed. I was grieving my job. We moved. There was so many things. And so when you get into that space where your mind is cycling, and so I want to ask your advice on this. When we're in that cycle of, I don't have my husband, we don't have this opportunity to travel again, and your mind keeps going back to that space and back to that space and back to that space, and you get stuck in that, well, there's no win there, right? Like, if there is no win. What would you suggest to people when they get into that space?
So there's a couple things. One is, okay, so when you lose somebody, there's this process with grief that, I'm sure you know more about than I do. There's 5 or 7 phases of grief, right? And they don't go through in this logical fashion. You jump all around. When someone is lost, know that when someone passes away, know that they're going to this most magnificent, loving place. Now, that's a nice comfort mental notion, you could say. It's true from my perspective, but for you, for the listener, it might be a mental notion. But the other is, it leaves a hole in the fabric of your environment, and you are going to grieve it. And so, you're going to go through this process where you are going to go cycle back, and you're going to go around through all of these things that you've talked about. And the thing is to honor it and to try and observe it from a neutral thing. Now, that's really tough to do if you're not on this path already and already, kind of progress to coming to this point where you can do this. I think if I lost my spouse right now, there would be grief, and I'd probably go through a bit of that, maybe a lot of it. I don't know, but I'd go through some of that myself. But I know that it is because intellectually, it's because I would be caught up in the story. I would absolutely miss her. I would absolutely miss some of the things that we had planned and stuff like that. But I also know and comforted in the fact that she is in this most wonderful and beautiful place of unconditional love, and that I will see her again. Maybe in an incarnated form, but I know for sure in spirit form, I will see her again. And I can talk to her right now if I want to, and she's in that spirit form. So I think you have to give yourself a bit of a break on that and grieve and go through it. But know at some point that if you carry on with that a long time, it's because you're caught up in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that person that's passed will want you to be moving on and to be able to process this information and to enjoy the rest of your life and make the most out of the rest of your life, so that you are exactly where you need to be on your spiritual journey and come to this point where you become possibly this beacon of light for others to experience and follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with all of that. It's just realizing that you're cycling through that, And sometimes it gets so deep and dark and heavy that you don't even want to come out. Like you can get to the place where you know that it would be good for you to eat some good meals and you drink more water and go for a good walk and but you don't want to. It's almost like a spite. It's like I'm not going to.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
feel like
And I haven't
it.
experienced that, so I cannot
Yeah.
speak to that from experience. I had my own stuff. I haven't had that one yet. So, but
Yeah.
but I do know that if you can get to this place of being the neutral observer,
Mhm.
really truly neutral, and that requires spiritual work to get there, requires you to be on this path to get there.
Right.
But at some point, if you take up this path and you get on there, you can and will get there and then go beyond.
Yeah. And I feel,
And that,
yeah, what you're saying there, I think a lot of times grief will bring that on because it seems like it's the only way out. And
yes,
because otherwise you just really get caught in that grieving process. And to me, it feels like the only way forward from that is to start to build your spiritual strength. And yeah, and it's not easy, but like you say, well worth the effort.
yes, just, I think the only thing you need to do is you need to understand that it doesn't happen quickly
Mm.
and that it takes this dedication to do it. And a key thing from my perspective, and I fully believe this, you don't have to, but I fully believe it, is that you need to learn how to meditate and you need to learn the purpose of meditation.
Mm.
And, there's a lot of really popular authors that are bestsellers and they continue to sell books. And I'm not saying anything disparaging about them, but in order for them to do that, they need to create things that necessarily don't tell the whole story, but are catering to the market of people that, what the people want. So, for example, there's lots of books on how you can manifest, your greatest desires and your greatest things. And most of that stuff is all ego wants,
Right.
not needs. You need nothing outside of yourself to be in a state of love, peace, and joy. You can do that being the wealthiest person in the world and live and having 5 mansions and a huge yacht and airplane and all the rest of it. You can do that in the back street of a slum. I'm not sure which would be easier. It'd be more comfortable to be wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
but it might actually be easier to do in the back street of a slum. I don't know. Those are two extremes, but it's usually the adversity. For a lot of people, it's the adversity and the trials and tribulations that bring them to this state of asking these very important questions. Why are we here? What's our purpose? Because if we're here to suffer and endure and struggle, then it's like, why would I do this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I got at is like, I was done with life. It's like, why would I go through this pain of working this hard, struggling, always putting up the facade, the front,
Mm-hmm.
to behave in a way which everybody expected me to behave in a way which is not my true self, to think, to, give lip service to somebody saying, well, this is the way to do it. This is what we have to do. And that if you disagree with them, you're not going to get work, or, they're going to be upset with you and there's going to be some consequences to it because, maybe that's who your boss is like or something. And so when you're not true to yourself, when you have a thought that is different than what you're speaking, that's not being true and accurate. Now, what you're thinking might not be true and accurate either, and what you speak might not be true and accurate. And that's where you need to dismantle these beliefs and cleanse them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you come back to that, and you can speak your truth, but do it in a way which is loving and gentle and not be afraid. Get fired, get fired. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to struggle through a job where I have to struggle every day, struggle with the structures and the processes and the environment that might be quite, for lack of a better term, soul destroying, so to speak. That would be a word that people kind of, or a phrase people use. It doesn't destroy your soul, by the way, but we use that term, right? Where it's just, it sucks the energy out of you every day. Why do that? That's not what life is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. This is what I'm thinking right now. It's like, we've given people a lot to think about and process. And I'm encouraging people to find you. Where do they find you?
Yeah, the easy way is the title of the book is A Higher Road. And if you go to ahigherroad.com, that'll take you to my author website. And the book is available globally wherever books are sold, easy to find on Amazon, easy to find in, electronic versions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I encourage people to, it takes a read through, and then it takes go back and do some of the exercises that you ask. Well, probably all of the exercises that you ask people to do. And it's just another way forward. And I love that you have put this all together in one book. These are the resources. This is what you do. And it's just so practical. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Well, I think probably one of the key things are that your life is really meant to be full of love and peace and joy. And if this is not your life, you have the ability to change it right where you are, whether you're in this mansion or whether you're on the street or anywhere in between. And it just takes some, not even courage. What it takes is desire. It takes, looking at yourself and being willing to be open and read something that, kind of maybe sounds a little woo-woo, if you will. But if you carry on that path, you'll find something that makes sense to you. And then once you find it, stick with it. It will need the key elements of learning how to meditation, what your target is, how to meditate, what your target is. And then you need some processes to help you cleanse your consciousness and rebuild it. And when you do that, you'll be on the path. And this stuff happens slowly. So, you're going to have to take some time and energy. It took me a year and without expectations. I had no expectations because I just didn't know what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Might take you less time, might take you more, but you have to go forward with faith and stick with the process, this diligence, and not have expectations about what it is that's going to happen. Because what will happen will be best for you.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Because it's a little bit like following the breadcrumbs. There's something, and then there's something else, and then there's something else. And you just have to, allow it to be the path. I love it. I love everything that you've shared. And I encourage people to check out this book and check out your website. And thank you again for taking the time.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you so much for allowing me to share this message and give people the opportunity to make a choice for themselves with, I can tell you, a proven process that works.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And thanks everyone for watching, and bye for now.